I am 18. You are number 3. Where's I am? Okay. Great. All right. I am 20. You are number 2. Who's I am 20? Okay. I found you. I am 22. You are number 6. Okay. Where's I am 22? Okay. So I am 28. That leaves you to be number 5. All right. I'll get that quickly into the Google box just in case you missed it. So
I got it for you. It's in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
Did you get it up there?
Yep, it's in the chat box.
Okay. Thank you. I will then take that away. You're our chat box expert. Right.
All right. And so I think that means that everyone except for contestant number 10 needs to go back into the hallway area, and we will keep number 10 with us. Goodbye for now.
Good luck.
Hello, number 10.
Hello. Can I get my prep time in 30 seconds?
Instead of the 15?
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I can
And I'm on an iPad, so when I move to Safari, you might not be able to see my face when I'm filling it out, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. And then one last thing, I have some time cards here I can do for when you speak. When you start speaking, then I'll give you verbal prompts if you would like until I see you come back into the screen. Would that help you then? For the first 30, I would say 30 seconds and then a minute until I see you appear on screen.
Yes.
And then I'll switch to the time cards. Okay, I figured. Are you going to be able to see these fine from where you're standing?
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right, so I'm about to drop that form into the chat. I know you're used to this process by now, but as soon as you get the form, go in and fill it out. It'll shoot your prompt at you, and as soon as you can see the prompt, go ahead and read it out loud to us. Your time will begin after you've finished reading it out loud. Okay?
Okay.
All right. There's the link.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have the prompt,
Okay, go ahead and read it out loud.
and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be a minority and not be suppressed.
All right, your time begins now.
Thirty seconds. One minute.
Judges, I would like to let you know that I'll be switching back to the quote to read it. So sorry, this lighting. I did not prepare for this. I remember my first day of 4th grade. I got there, my teacher was the nicest person in the world, and I had made so many new friends during the open house. I met everyone in person, we talked, we chatted, I met the new students, but I realized something quickly. Though I live in a very diverse district, I went to one of the least diverse schools in my area. I was a minority within my school, but I didn't see it that way. I was 9 years old. As the school year progressed, a day came in recess that I'll never forget. A girl pointed to the splotchy spots on my skin because I had been tanned because of my complexion had changed during the summer. She asked, "What happened? Are you okay?" I had no idea how to respond, what that meant, or what that would mean in the future. My brother told me about his experiences in the college admissions process and how it was similar to the questions he was being asked during these interviews that carded him as a minority. These experiences let me know and relate directly to the quote. And that is my definition of democracy: the right to be a minority and not be suppressed. Lee Harvey Oswald. This idea of equality is often preached in democracy. We've seen big politicians and activists alike preach the idea of equality and how the United States values embody this. But we mean equality. No, really, equality. This can be seen through people speaking out, through the Black Lives Matter movement, my friends' experience up north, and the healthcare systems, voting systems, and different systemic inequalities that are causing minorities in America to see suppression in their own communities. The recent rise of the Black Lives Matter movement has given light to so many issues in our communities that have caused minorities to be put under the rug. Whether that has to do with education, jobs and opportunities, even healthcare, has been taken away from minorities in our communities. We need to prioritize why these things are happening. Why is it that certain impoverished communities don't have access to proper resources in education? Why don't they have there's one pharmacy for 70,000 people living in these slums? This is a huge concern in the U.S., yet it is rarely talked about until this was brought to light by the Black Lives Matter movement. We claim to see equality, but until we address why minorities are under suppression, are we really a democracy? Personally, I, of course, live in a very diverse district, as I mentioned before, but I realize going 100 miles up north changes everything. The large scape of the United States shows us what it really means to be a democracy in such a large country. Though we look at countries like India, India does not have the diversity that the United States does. My friend went up north for a nice road trip during the COVID-19 pandemic. They were the only people wearing masks in this more conservative neighborhood. Out of nowhere, someone shouted in his face, "Go back to your country." He was an Indian, just like me. He told me the story through text. He said, "Hey, Arushi, this just happened today. I don't know what to do." And I was shocked. I live in a school district where it's 40% white, 40% Asian, 10% African American, and 10% other minorities. I had never heard of this concept before, maybe through small experiences in school, but it was unheard of to me. I listened to his experiences and I felt deeply connected that just going 100 miles up north changes everything. Imagine going to other areas of the United States and being a minority. Would we really experience democracy? My last point has to do especially with the systems. People often try that systemic racism doesn't exist or systemic problems are just a facade created by minority activists to gouge voters. But this could not be far from the truth. Healthcare systems do not pertain, I apologize for the phone, do not pertain to minorities of women and minorities in looking for healthcare. This has to do that women in healthcare systems, women looking for healthcare are not believed. This has caused many minority women to lose healthcare options. There was a study done of medical students, and some 20 to 30% of them believed that Black women had thicker skin. This is horrible and horrifying to see. Voting systems, the polling stations are not close in minority areas, and minorities don't have access to these voting stations. This is causing elections to be skewed. Not only was this only recently addressed in the 2020 election because of movements like Black Lives Matter, but it is causing a clear imbalance within the United States. So I look back on my fourth grade experiences and I compare it to the stories and the preachments from the Black Lives Matter movements, my personal experiences of my friend from up north, and the healthcare and voting systems in the United States. This idea of systemic racism. We claim to be a democracy, but we must embody these ideas as a country. The quote, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be a minority and not be suppressed, by Lee Harvey Oswald, embodies the idea that in the United States, we are only a democracy when we take in heart equality. And I mean real systemic equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry about the phone and the moving. That's not so sorry.
Okay, that's why they call it impromptu, right? All right, I had a time of 6:27. Does that sound correct, other judges?
Go ahead.
I had 6:25, so pretty close.
Oh, okay. Here, I'll round it. I'll do 6:26. How's that
That
sound?
sounds good.
Rounding.
Is it I am 20?
Yes, 20 is next.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
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 All right. Contestant 20, would you want time cards today?
Yes, please. And then
Okay.
can I get 15 seconds on intervals during my prep time?
Yes,
Regardless of if I go over a minute.
Yeah, and you just want me to give those to you verbally, correct, right?
Sure.
Like 15, 30, 45, okay.
Yeah.
And then from where you're performing, will you be able to see these time cards okay?
Let me check.
I can always hold them pretty close too.
Yes. I also plan on timing myself, if that's okay.
That is totally fine.
My room is super cramped, so like I might be speaking and my head might be somewhat cut off.
That's
You guys want- I can try to do it like from back here.
That's okay, yeah, that's coming through fine wherever you have to go.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So
So you know the drill by now. You're going to open that link that's over there in the chat, fill it out. It is going to spit the prompt at you. As soon as you can see the prompt, read it out loud to us. And after you finish reading the quote out loud, we'll start your time.
okay. Please. Okay, opening the prompt now. And that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed by Lee Harvey Oswald, correct?
Your time begins now.
Yeah. Okay.
$15 seconds. $30 seconds. $45 seconds. One minute.
As of now, I have two parents who are both immigrants. In fact, they both came here from North Africa, specifically Morocco. Since I've gone into school, whether it be from kindergarten to even now as a senior in high school, I have regularly felt as if I'm part of a minority, simply because in my grade, there was only one other person who comes from the same place that I do. Today, I was given the quote, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and to not be oppressed, by Lee Harvey Oswald, and I wholeheartedly agree with this quote. Today, we're going to be de-analyzing it from three key points of analysis. The first is going to be through the Electoral College, one of the foundational principles that America was created upon. The second is going to be an example of the reverse of this quote, in which we see public schools in impoverished areas getting less funding. And the third is going to be talking about the poverty to prison pipeline through one of my favorite books, Behind the Beautiful Forevers by Catherine Booth. First, to talk about the Electoral College. Now, when America was created, we instituted this system specifically so that those in the minorities would not be oppressed. In fact, one of the biggest themes in the Electoral College is that those in rural states which have smaller populations are represented or even overrepresented to an extent that which the presidential candidate who is campaigning in those states has to pay attention to them. Thus, one of the founding principles of America has always been that the minority should never be oppressed in any circumstance, because through the Electoral College, we get representations for rural states who have lower populations than their urban counterparts. And because of this, presidents have to pay their due diligence to these small states, otherwise they may risk losing the votes. Next, I'd like to talk about the reverse of this quote, and this is through public schools. Lee Harvey Oswald says, "My definition of democracy is the right to be in a minority and to not be oppressed." We see that right now the public school system is not adhering to this principle. Public schools are essentially funded by property taxes, which means that the value of the school is created by the housing around it. Now, thereby, in impoverished areas, we see that public schools are much lower quality, with the students not receiving the same type of education that those in the richer counterparts do. This is not fair. Just because somebody is in an impoverished minority does not mean that they should be denied the right to basic human principles such as that of education. As a kid, you have no control of what kind of family you're born into, whether that be extremely rich or extremely poor. That's completely an external factor. Thereby, we shouldn't have public schools that are receiving much less funding than other ones when the kids have nothing to do with that funding. Finally, I'd like to talk about the poverty to prison pipeline through Behind the Beautiful Forevers. Behind the Beautiful Forevers follows Abdul, a trash picker coming out of one of the slums in India. Essentially, it covers his story as he works to provide for his family, and he goes through all of these horrific trials that no child should ever have to go through, and he only goes through them simply because he was born into a lower caste. Now, the slum he lives in is a stark minority in contrast to the big gaping hotels that oversee the complex that he lives in. But similarly to what the quote speaks as, just because he's part of that impoverished minority doesn't exclude him from getting access to basic things like food, water, and education. Through Behind the Beautiful Forevers, we see an example of the impacts that the inverse of Lee Harvey Oswald's quote can have, as we see that Abdul is surrounded by a life of crime, poverty, sadness, and despair. Thereby, when we look at this quote, we have to be considering through Abdul, why are people in minority populations oppressed, and is it for good reason? Because I would say that it's not. Now, today, I was given the quote, and that is my definition of democracy: the right to be in a minority and not be oppressed. And I wholeheartedly agree with this quote. I gave 3 reasons. The first is the Electoral College, through which America's key foundational principles of fighting for the little guy were created. The second was through the stark disparities between different public school systems and how those are directly impacting minority populations that were born into poverty. And the third is through Behind the Beautiful Forevers, where we see the poverty to prison and poverty pipeline. Now, today, I agreed with this quote simply because the situation you're born into should not determine your future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, and I had a time of 6:02.
That's what I had as well.
Perfect.
Good for me.
All right. Next up is going to be number 18.
Awesome. I'll be right back.
Hey judges, do you want our cameras on? I didn't want to turn it on when he was in the speech, but do you want our cameras on when people are speaking?
Great question. I would say if you're in a non-distracting environment and there's not like a bunch of stuff happening behind you, feel free to leave your camera on. But if you're more comfortable leaving it off, that's also okay.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Hello, contestant 18.
Hi.
Hi. All right. Before we get started today, are you going to want time cards?
Yeah, can I get, for verbal, can I get 15 seconds up for the prep until a minute? And then can I get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 30 seconds, and then 10, the last 10 on fingers, if that's okay?
Yep, I can do that. And I have time cards right here. Will you be able to see them?
Yeah, I can just make it full screen and it'll be visible. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Right, so I know you know the drill by now, but that form is over there in the chat. Fill it out. As soon as you can see the prompt, read it out loud to us. And once you've finished reading it out loud, your time will begin.
Sure, I'm just going to set up my camera.
Yep, feel free.
The prompt, and that is my definition of democracy: the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed.
Your time begins now.
15 seconds. $30. 45 seconds.
At my school, one of the most esteemed clubs is NHS. But another club that we really participate in and a lot of people get involved with is student government. Now, as the tutoring chair for this association, one of the biggest responsibilities that I have is to be able to tutor the most people and also make sure that I get the opinions of the entire class, how good my tutoring has been, and anything that I can improve on. Now, it's really important that even when people are oppressed, we can still hear their opinions. Looking at today's quote, I cannot help but agree with it. And that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed. I will show the essence of this quote through three facets of analysis. I'll begin by talking a little bit about MLK and how he dealt with suppression but was able to overcome it for his people. Second, I want to talk about Malala Yousafzai and a little bit about what she did in women's education reform. And I want to conclude by exploring one of my personal narratives about how I deal with some type of oppression but also overcome it. Let me begin by talking about MLK. Now, MLK was born in the heart of segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. There was a lot of racial tensions that were building up between African Americans and white, merely on the basis of skin. And this was something that he believed needed to be gone. Because of the ideals that our founding fathers had laid on, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he believed that if we needed these ideals, we really needed to understand the main definition of democracy. And that is that everybody has a say in the government. However, in southern states, white people were oppressing African Americans, and they never had a fair say. Now, MLK's goal was to be able to somehow change this, and not only just his part in Alabama, but all throughout the country. And he was able to successfully do that. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and Malcolm X, he took their teachings of nonviolent protest and instilled that character with his people to make sure that they could be heard. He provided a platform for everyone to speak and for all minorities to be heard and really share their opinion with everybody else. Second, I want to talk about a similar activist, but in the developing country of Pakistan, Malala Yousafzai. Now, Malala Yousafzai had a similar story to MLK. Now, women in Pakistan generally were not seen as working beyond just in the domestic home. They would either take care of children, clean, or cook. And because of this, most of the time, a lot of women were suppressed and their ideas were not even considered by men, not only in politics, but also in the social atmosphere. It is something that everybody had acknowledged and nobody was trying to make advances to improve the current condition of women. However, Malala was the woman that decided to do that. She thought that if Pakistan was a democracy, then they had the right to make sure that every minority group could be able to speak. So she started her education reform movements. She went to developing countries like China and Africa to build schools there to show that by women getting an education, they really can have any type of influence in any political or social sphere. And that was her entire goal. She wanted to really establish a democracy and make sure that women were no longer oppressed. I want to talk a little bit about a personal example dealing with a volunteering experience that I had, which now makes up most of my weekends. I'm a part of an organization called Support 313, which provides moral support for impoverished citizens in the city of Detroit. Now, Metro Detroit, as we all know, is filled with a lot of crime and poverty. And a lot of times people have labeled African Americans as people who will never be educated or seen beyond criminals. However, I try to speak and really show them that these minority groups should not be suppressed. One way that I do that is by going down to Detroit with my friends every single weekend and really speaking about them and learning some of the narratives that they've experienced throughout their entire life. And I'm trying to help them, whether it may be in education by tutoring them in schools, whether it may be in writing or reading, to improve their literacy so that they can share their opinions eloquently to society. And it's something that I have really defined as my goal, helping people to make sure that minority groups are heard, not just in my community, but in several. Now, when I looked at today's quote, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed. I looked at that through three aspects. I began by talking about MLK and how he was dealing with so much segregation and oppression. However, what he did was use nonviolent protesting to help make sure that people were heard. Second, I talked about Malala Yousafzai and how in the world of education, she wanted to make sure all women had access to it. So she started to speak up. And I concluded by talking about my personal narrative with Support 3 and 3 and how we really have to make sure as a world, we try to make sure everyone has a chance to speak and a platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had the time as 6:08.
Okay, thank you so much. I can get the next person whenever you're ready.
Thanks. The next person is going to be contestant 14.
Got it, perfect.
Thank you. Welcome, contestant 14.
Hello, could you give me a second to adjust my camera?
Yep, your time.
Here, while you're doing that, would you like time cards today?
For prep, I would like 15, 30, 45, 60, and then for the speech, I want nothing.
You don't want anything for okay, well then never mind.
And then I have my own timer, like in this general direction. So if I'm looking at it, that's where I'm looking.
Okay.
Okay. I'm opening up the form right now.
Yep.
I will let you know once I have submitted it.
As soon as you can see the prompt, go ahead and read it out loud to us. And when you finish reading it out loud, that's when your time will begin.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then this is my note card blank.
Great.
And that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed.
Your time begins now.
$15 seconds. $30 seconds. $45 seconds. One minute.
Imagine a world like this. A world that was completely suppressed or imagine a world that was completely free of oppression, and every single person, animal, and insect, and even plant, not dependent on what creed, ethnicity, species even, was that type, they were treated the exact same as everyone else. People in power were treated the exact same as those ants and beetles that are sprung around our entire house. When I was presented with the prompt, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed by Lee Harvey Oswald, I thought of this fictional world and how far away we as Earth are away from that. Today, I will be looking at this quote from a couple different perspectives. First, I will be dissecting this quote. Then I will be looking at it from American history, specifically the Constitution and World War II. And then I will be looking at it from a perspective in my own school. Now, what does the quote, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed, mean for people like you and me? Simply put it, what I thought of this quote was that every single person would be treated the exact same, the way that democracy should be in the first place. Every single person would be treated fairly and not be judged based on how they are or how they look, how they act, or how they decide to express themselves in terms of clothing or sexual orientation. Democracy as in the way that the Constitution was meant to be written in the first place. And now I want to look back at the Constitution and how there were several different ways of hypocrisy in this very old document in the United States. About how when George Washington and John Hancock and Thomas Jefferson wrote and signed the Constitution saying all men are equal while still owning slaves and holding the 3/5 rule to prevent any slave or person of color from having an entire vote in the legislative system in the United States. Now, one way that we can relate this to World War II is the Japanese internment camps that were placed throughout it. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, America got extremely paranoid after the events of Japan and Germany and all of the events of World War II stacking on top of each other. Because of this, the American government decided to take every single Japanese person, strip them of almost everything they've ever had, and put them into an internment camp, which was basically a prison. Over time, this camp grew and evolved to be more of a home for these Japanese people, but at the time, it was extremely detrimental to both them and the country, especially because the United States had banned Japanese people from entering the country almost 20 years before World War II. And because of this, you can see how these Japanese people who were in the minority were treated so terribly. Now, one way that I saw this in my entire life was through my high school. In my school, we have an extremely diverse group of people, from people in the LGBT community to people who are several different races. And one way that I wanted to be able to help our community was to try and start a diversity council. I tried to talk to teachers and even our principal. And after a while, I was able to understand that no matter what creed or ethnicity people are, they should be able to join this diversity council and be able to express how they feel on any given opportunity. Today, I talked about the quote, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed, by Lee Harvey Oswald. Today, I talked about the Constitution and how that has been very flawed over the years. I talked about the Japanese internment camps and how they suppressed Japanese people. And then I talked about my own school and how I was able to do my part to make the minority be heard. Now, I want to present the situation with you in the world that I explained earlier. Would you want to be in the same world we are now, where oppression can be seen left and right? Or would you want to try and make a better world for yourself? That I will leave up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have your time as 6:13.
Yep, that's what I had as well.
Awesome.
And me.
Yep, same here.
So our next contestant is going to be number 28.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, contestant 28.
Hello.
Hello. All right, as we get set up and get ready to get started today, are you going to want time cards?
That would be wonderful.
Hey,
I can arrange that for you. I just want to make sure you can see them from where you'll be standing and performing.
That is perfect.
Okay, would you like me to do verbals while you're prepping then?
I would love that.
Okay, would you like 15 or 30-second intervals?
15 would be wonderful.
I can do that for you.
great. And you know the drill. I'm sure you're already filling out the form over there on the side. Once you get it open and you can see the prompt, read it out loud to us. And when you get to the end of that prompt, that's when your time will start.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is my definition of democracy: to be in a minority and to not be suppressed.
Your time begins now.
Fifteen seconds. Thirty seconds. Forty-five seconds. One minute.
I stand here before you today as a white woman. My skin is white, and the way I present myself to society oftentimes gets me more privilege than a minority would. And as I've grown up and as I've realized how oppressive and terrible society can be, I've learned that I need to use this to other people's advantage. I have something that not everyone in the United States has, and really around the world, yet it shouldn't be this way. Why is it that because I have white skin, I am more privileged and more preferred to society than someone who has darker skin or someone that's a visible minority? This is truly oppressive, and we cannot claim to be a full democracy unless this is resolved. We cannot oppress people, actively oppress people, and yet claim we're at this state of democracy. When I was given the quote today, and that is my definition of democracy, the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed, by Lee Harvey Oswald, I interpret this to mean that democracy is a destination that we will truly never achieve. And we can look at this through three lenses. We can look at it through disproportionate arrest rates, poverty stereotypes, and the education system as a whole. The first lens, we can look at the fact that democracy is a destination that we will never reach through, is disproportionate arrest rates for people of color. Now, we can talk about the entire people of color community. However, I'd like to specifically hone in on the Black community. It is a fact that Black neighborhoods are overpoliced, and as a result, there are thousands of Black men sitting in jail cells for often nonviolent charges. This is, to put simply, appalling and disgusting. We're seeing these people ruining their lives are being wasted away for something that doesn't necessarily affect society as a whole. We need to see that minorities in this nation are not valued, and they're suppressed by the systems that are meant to uplift them. The second lens, we can look at the fact that democracy is a destination that we will never truly achieve through, is poverty stereotypes. We are all prejudiced, and that's a fact. We all have implicit biases that form when we are making judgments about others. And I think that the majority of people have this judgment around people that are impoverished. And it is most definitely a fact that the majority of people in poverty are people of color. Now, these stereotypes end up being extremely harmful when these people of color that are in poverty go to get help. We often find ourselves saying, oh, there's something they could have done different. This is all their fault. When in reality, that is absolutely not the case. People in poverty are not in poverty by choice. They don't sit around waiting for a job to come to them. These people are truly harmed by the systems that are implemented to uplift us, which I mentioned earlier. There seems to be this pattern that there are systems in place that are inherently going to benefit others and harm others at the same exact time. This is not what a democracy does. The third lens we can look at the fact that democracy is a destination we will never truly reach is through the education system. We can look at a district that has thousands of white teachers, yet a community of students that are mostly people of color. And we can see that these teachers, their implicit biases harm the students that they're teaching in their decision making. They find themselves blaming the students for laziness and whatnot, when that's never really the case. However, we can take this same school district and assume that their teacher population has gotten more diverse. And we know for a fact that the student body will be more successful in this case. These minorities are simply being suppressed and oppressed by the white people that are in charge. Democracy is something we can never truly reach if the people in charge aren't helping. And if the people in charge aren't accurately reflecting the makeup of America, then there will be no progress. When I was given the quote today and my definition of democracy is the right to be in a minority and not to be suppressed, I chose to view this as the fact that democracy is a destination that we will never truly reach. And we can look at this through three lenses: disproportionate arrest rates, the poverty stereotypes that exist in our society, and the education system. I, as a white woman, directly benefit from the color of my skin, yet I am aware that that is simply not the case for the majority of Americans. We need to make a change, and fast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have your time as 6:01. And our last contestant is going to be number 22.
All right. Great.
Hi.
Hi there, contestant 22. All right, so before we get started today, are you going to want time cards?
Please, are you going to be showing them?
That will actually be Judge Anthony.
I will actually be doing that for you. So
Okay.
if you wanted to, wherever you're going to perform, if you want to just make sure you can read this fine from there.
Yep. That's perfect.
Okay, perfect. And then would you like the verbal cues for prep then?
Yes, please.
Would you like it 15 or 30-second intervals?
30 seconds.
All right, I can do that for you.
Thank you.
All right, and you know the drill by now. That form is over there in the chat. Go ahead and fill it out. When you can see
Okay.
the prompt, read the prompt out loud to us. And once you get to the end of reading the prompt out loud, your time will begin.
Can you see me fine here?
Yep.
This is
Yes.
good. I'll check first. You guys can see me. I'm getting very comfortable with typing my email. Okay. And that is my definition of democracy: the right to be in a minority and not be suppressed.
Your time begins
Lee
now.
Harvey Oswald.
Thirty seconds. 1 minute. One minute 30. Two minutes. And that is my definition of democracy. The right to be in a minority and not be suppressed. Lee Harvey Oswald. This is actually not a traditional definition of democracy. And today I want to explore that. First, I'm going to talk about what democracy is as we know it now. Secondly, based on this quote, what democracy perhaps should be. And lastly, how American democracy may need to be reevaluated so that this quote speaks truth in the United States. So first, what is democracy? Democracy is ruled by the people. Democracy is ruled by the majority. In this quote, my definition of democracy is the right to be a minority and not be suppressed is actually in opposition to the traditional definition of a democracy. A democracy is a society in which when a consensus is formed among a majority of people, they are able to make that actionable. That is what's used to guide society, to move society forward, what the majority believe. But is this the right interpretation of democracy? To my second point, what should democracy really be? Should democracy be based more on equity than on equality? Should everyone be given the same voice and the loudest group of voices be taken into consideration? Or should the voices given to people be proportionate? Should the voices of minorities be elevated and the voices of the majority be suppressed so that the two voices can both sing together and not one drown out the voice of the other? So 3, perhaps we need to reevaluate our notion of democracy in the United States. This quote, my definition of democracy is the right to be a minority and not be suppressed, it does not ring true within the United States. White people in the United States have an overwhelming influence on the elections of our country. For example, white people comprise about 60% of our population, African Americans 15%. So do the two, one a minority, one a majority, do the two have the same voice in influencing our country, the direction of our country, who its leaders are? No, they don't. But is that a compromise we're willing to make? Is that the kind of society we want to live in, where perhaps it's not about status as a minority or a majority, but it's about what sum of people is largest? So today I've sort of talked about what we traditionally define as a democracy. Ruled by the people, the largest group of people, consensus among the largest group of people in a society. And then I talked about what our democracy really should be. Perhaps it should be more about equity as opposed to consensus among the most, because often the most are the majority and they share certain characteristics. They share certain values, certain ideals, certain aspirations, and maybe live in similar conditions and are influenced in that way. So in America, should we reconsider how we define democracy? Should we reconsider our form of democracy? Perhaps we should. Perhaps we should elevate equity above
consensus. Perhaps we should ensure everyone has the same voice and some voices aren't able to drown out the voices of others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had your time as 6:03. All right, and I think that brings us to the end of our round. So guys, congratulations. It is a huge deal.
Congratulations, everyone.
Well done, everybody.
All of you.
Congratulations.
A hard season that you persevered to the end and the technology has pulled us through. That's amazing.
Congrats.
Thank you all.
And good luck out there. We hope to see you around the forensics circuit in the guys.
Thank you for judging.
Person.
Thank you for judging.
Have a good day, guys.
Have a good night, everyone.
Stay.
So when are we meeting next? Has that been delayed? Probably.
My guess is yes.
I'm going to say, yeah, if you wanted to stick around the general meeting, I'm sure it'll eventually get back up there. But they were doing awards on a YouTube link, so I wonder if that was timed to open at a certain time, what they're going to do now.
Oh yeah, it doesn't look like they've given a Zoom link yet, so I guess I'll wait for that. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys.
Yeah, lots of fun, huh? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Prompted.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.